So earlier this week, I saw a YouTube video from two people who I'll admit I'm not that familiar with them. Their names are Jonathan Lamb and Suzy Lamb, his wife. And basically, they are part of a very big Christian ministry called Daystar. And I'll tell you more about Daystar in a second. But this was one of those like very cryptic videos, almost like a YouTube apology video, except they weren't apologizing. They were basically saying something big is going to come out and we want you to be prepared for it. And we feel like what we did is the right thing to do. And I'm like, I don't know what you were talking about, but something happened and I'm dying to know what that is. And I'm going to play for you like the first minute of their video just so you can experience what I experienced when I watched it.
Hey guys, Jonathan and Suzy Lamb here. We just wanted to get on here because so many of you have been concerned about how we're doing, and we just wanted to let you know that we no longer work at Daystar. A lot has been going on over the last couple of years that we just couldn't talk about. But we've given over all of our evidence over to multiple reporters, including the police department. Daystar was contacted for a comment by the journalist Friday, November 15th, and then I was subsequently fired the following day, November 16th.
Some scary things happened, being followed, private investigators, intimidation, threats. Even through all of that, things don't stop. So we felt like we had no other option but to reach out to a journalist. When you bring things to the light, things, get better. So that's what we did.
Absolutely.
So that sounds freaky. What the hell was going on? Also, yikes, that sounds frightening. Like, why are they being followed and threatened? They said later in the video they were filming that from an undisclosed location because we simply do not feel safe at our home now. Like, what the hell is happening? So they said one of the journalists that they contacted was this woman named Julie Royce, who's done a lot of reporting about the Christian world. She's broken a lot of stories about scandals in the conservative Christian world. She's also someone whose beliefs I don't agree with because she's like a conservative Christian herself. But the reporting is solid when she does it. She has made quite a few splashes in the religion world. So the question is, when was she going to publish this article, right? And then about 24 hours later, less than 24 hours later, her article dropped. And oh my God, I wasn't expecting any of the stuff that she said, but it was frightening. Basically, the short version of it is that someone in this ministry, in this family-run, family-operated ministry, someone was accused of sexually abusing that couple's little girl, and the ministry's leaders, who are also their family members, had gone to great lengths to cover it all up. So extremely scary, extremely disturbing stuff. Just to give you an idea of some of the revelations that were in this article by Julie Royce, which again, it was extremely thorough, I thought. Here's what happened. In 2020, Jonathan and Suzy's little girl told them that she had been touched inappropriately by some guy. And this guy had allegedly used his fingers to, I'll say, rape her in certain parts of her body. Very disturbing. Now, the little girl couldn't identify the guy for her parents, but Jonathan and Suzy had a hunch before long. They're like, we think we know who the guy is who may have done this, but we're not necessarily positive about it. So in 2021, now that they kind of have their detectors on and they're looking out for this guy, in 2021, that same relative apparently followed that girl, who's now 5 years old. They followed her to her bedroom when she was changing to go swimming. And she wasn't wearing any clothes at one point, and Jonathan bursts in the room because his wife is like, I think the dude is in the room with our daughter. He bursts into the room, sees the relative, sees his daughter wearing nothing because she's changing. So that's disturbing. Who knows what else happened? Around that same time, Royce reported, the girl became terrified to visit the offices of the ministry because that dude was always there. According to the article, the girl would run and hide whenever he walked into the room. And when the Lambs, Jonathan and Suzy, were filming their TV show for the ministry, the relative, by the way, this dude was a relative because everyone in this ministry is a relative. This guy was often with that girl and other kids in a separate area. And other family members told Jonathan and Suzy that they saw this guy, and I'm quoting here, putting his hands all over the child and kissing her. So disturbing. And the last thing is, and I'm not sure chronologically when this happened, but at one point the Lambs they have 2 kids. Both of those kids were sleeping over at that relative's house before they suspected any of this. And that event, they said, led to a complete change in their daughter's demeanor. She went from being, quote, the most affectionate, loud, fun child to a quiet girl who avoided most touch, especially from men, including her own father. So that's a lot of the stuff that happened. Now, as these concerns started to mount, Jonathan and Suzy went to his parents, the people who ran and founded this ministry, Marcus Lamb and his wife, Joni Lamb. And they basically didn't do anything against the relative in question. I'm going to refer to him as Pete. That is what Julie Roys refers to him in the article. That's not his real name. But Marcus and Joni would not kick Pete out of the ministry. I don't know what his relationship to them is. I'm assuming there is one here. But they seemed more interested in protecting their ministry from bad publicity than kicking out someone who was allegedly sexually abusing their own granddaughter. And then they asked Jonathan and Suzy to not talk to the police about it, and that the relative who was sitting in the room with their daughter who wasn't wearing any clothes, it wasn't that big of a deal. And then, because we are talking about conservative Christians, guess what Joni Lamb said? Let me show you. This is from Julie Roy's article here. Suzy added that when she strongly objected, saying that didn't explain why Pete was in the room with her naked daughter, Joni blamed the couple's daughter, saying she was the one who took her clothes off. At this, she's 5, by the way, that little girl. At this, Suzy said she began screaming at the mother-in-law, but Joni was adamant and reiterated her claims several times over the next 24 hours. Joni Lamb is like, yeah, but what was the 5-year-old wearing? Nothing? Then it's her fault. It's like the worst possible answer you could give in that situation. So after that blow up, the Lambs are still with the whole family. Because again, this is a family-run business. It's a multi-million-dollar business here. They all travel together. They all do everything together. And so at one point, there's like a ministry retreat, basically a beach house everyone stays at. And at that point, they're all at some retreat. And Jonathan and Suzy are like, well, the kids are supposed to sleep upstairs in a separate bedroom. I think we would like to have all the kids sleep in the room next to ours, just so we can keep an eye on them and just in case anyone, I don't know, comes to visit them in the middle of the night. And Joni Lamb, the matriarch of the family, did not like that either. This is what she said to that. That night, when Suzy insisted their kids sleep in the room next to them instead of upstairs, Joni confronted her, saying, "Look at what you're doing to this family. What about Pete's wife and Pete? What about their feelings? Won't anyone think of the alleged sex predators? What the hell is wrong with this woman? Oh my God." I think I just knocked over some water. She followed that up, by the way. That's bad enough. This idea that why isn't anyone thinking about Pete? Joni then followed all of that up by announcing to the family that God spoke to her in the middle of the night and told her that Pete is innocent. So everyone can just shut the hell up, I guess. So at this point, all of this stuff is blowing up. This is what's going on for years inside Daystar Ministries here. And it eventually caught up with Jonathan and Suzy too. Jonathan said that earlier this calendar year, he was demoted from his job because he would not sign a non-disclosure agreement. And then, as he said in the video, he was fired this past weekend for not addressing, quote, the deficiencies in his judgment and performance. I don't know what those deficiencies were, but it sure is coincidental that all this is coming out the same time he's getting fired. And the reason this is a big deal, one of the reasons this is a big deal, not just the alleged crime itself, is because if you go back a few years, Jonathan Lamb, the guy you saw in that video, was basically the heir apparent to this ministry. His father, Marcus Lamb, had drawn up succession plans, and I think it was assumed that whenever Marcus dies, he's going to hand control of this multi-million-dollar ministry to Jonathan. But after these events and these blowups all occur, it turns out Marcus comes up with a brand new succession plan that writes Jonathan out of the picture. He was going to hand control of the ministry over to his wife, Joni. So I should tell you that when Julie Roys contacted Daystar about all the allegations, this is what Daystar said in response. Daystar responded with a written statement which said in part, "There is clearly a misunderstanding of what transpired, and the facts are quite different than what appears to have been reported to you." Okay, do you want to clarify? They did not really clarify anything. So that's one thing. I like this one a lot. This is from Pete's lawyer, who Roy's also reached out to. Pete's lawyer also claimed in his letter that his client had volunteered to sit for a clinical polygraph examination, a lie detector test. He was found to be truthful in the polygraph examination, wherein he denied and refuted these baseless claims. See, everybody, Pete took a lie detector test and he passed it, so can everyone go away? What I find interesting about that particular note is that after it turns out Marcus Lamb, the guy who founded this whole ministry, he has died. More on that in a second. And within a few months of him dying, Joni Lamb married a new guy. And she's been with him for a few years. And guess what that guy does for a living? He owns a polygraph company. He owns a lie detector company. Now, is he the dude that did the lie detector test on Pete, who Joni was trying to protect? I have no idea. But I just find that to be weirdly coincidental as well. Okay. And both of those people, Daystar Ministries and Pete's lawyers, they all say this is all fake news, and Jonathan is just trying to get revenge because he wasn't named his father's successor. So all of this is like a real-life version of the righteous gemstones, and this is how a Christian ministry operates when they're confronted with internal scandals. Like, they would rather destroy their own family rather than publicly admit that someone within their own ranks might be capable of doing something so horrible to a child. And I feel like I need to give you some context about this ministry before you get completely sympathetic toward Jonathan and Suzy, who seem to have done everything you would hope parents would do. Maybe they didn't have a way out, and that's why they stuck around for this long. But you do need to know a little bit about this ministry, because a few years ago, the first time I really heard about Daystar was in 2020 during the pandemic, because Daystar Television was one of the worst anti-vax media outlets during the pandemic. Right Wing Watch pointed out that there were over 80 episodes worth of misinformation about the virus and the vaccine at some point on their ministry's website. Marcus Lamb himself told his viewing audience that they ought to consider ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, neither of which actually help with COVID and have been shown, scientifically, they don't help you. They might hurt you. So that's what that guy was doing. And then Marcus Lamb, along with the right-wing American Family Association, they sued the Biden administration over vaccine mandates. And they said those mandates were a sin against God's holy word. Because those mandates, they would have said everyone in a large business either has to get vaccinated or tested every week. And they said, well, if you impose that rule on us, you might cause our employees to sin. Because, I don't know, sticking a swab up your nose was sinning. I think their argument is that if you get vaccinated, well, vaccines, as everyone knows in the Christian world, vaccines are made from the blood of fetuses, I guess. And they're just cracked open and boom, you get a vaccine. Liberals drink straight from the tap. None of that is true. But this is what they thought about vaccines. And then the kicker, Marcus Lamb was then diagnosed with COVID. And then he died of COVID because that dude was not vaccinated. He rejected the cure, he lied to his audience, and then he died of COVID. Like patient zero when it comes to the leopards eating people's faces party. One other thing you should know about Daystar is that when the pandemic was happening, they also applied for PPP loans, those loans that companies could ask for because they couldn't actually meet to work. Daystar Television was eligible to get loans, and they asked for it. They asked for nearly $4 million to pay their staffers, supposedly. And that wasn't illegal. All nonprofits were eligible to apply for PPP loans, and they did get them, and that includes churches. But Inside Edition's Lisa Guerrero found out that after Marcus Lamb got that $4 million, guess what he did? He suddenly bought a multi-million-dollar private plane. Yep. Got a few $1,000,000 that he wasn't expecting. He just bought a plane. And then he used that plane to go on family vacations. And then members of the family posted about it on Instagram. And it was only after Lisa Guerrero aired that report on Inside Edition that the ministry paid back the entire loan with interest. But that's who Marcus Lamb was. It was a guy who used Christianity to enrich himself and his family. And he knew that just fighting culture wars and pretending to be persecuted, that was the easy path to wealth. Because there's no shortage of Christians you can manipulate if you just use God in every sentence. And he never gave a damn about who he was hurting in the process. And when he was alive, he also apparently, allegedly, protected a dude who was supposedly molesting his own granddaughter. I don't know how much of the stuff I just told you Jonathan Lamb was involved with, but he was part of the ministry for many of these years. He was going along with all of it. And none of that excuses the awful thing that he is talking about this week. I'm just saying you should have the full picture before you decide whether you like this guy, want to be on his side or not. But for his sake, I will tell you, they did go to the police years ago, even though their family told them not to do it. They did it anyway. But I guess because there wasn't hard evidence, the police didn't really have a case. But that case has now been reopened. And I don't know what will come of that. I don't know what will happen to Jonathan and Suzy. Suzy said also to the Julie Roys more recently this week that she was subject to sexual harassment in the ministry. And that's just something she dealt with, she said, lived with it for many years. So very disturbing stuff all around. All right, I'm going to stop there for this story and take any questions. What do we got? Feel so bad for that little girl. She's the only real victim in all of that. I mean, seriously, just awful what she's going through. I hope that girl is okay. And I hope her parents now at least get the hell out of that ministry and start lives somewhere else. Like, not every church is horrible. They could find another church if they want to do Jesus stuff. They don't have to stick with the family business. Yeah, those faces speak for all of us. Thank you. It's very disturbing. Why was the relative even allowed in the house? Not victim blaming, parent blaming. I don't know. I don't know what the family dynamic is. I don't know what Pete's position was in the family business, but it seems like this family is pretty insular. And so they all do everything together and they work together and they hang out together and travel, vacation together. So why was he in the house? For the same reason any relative would come to a lot of gatherings, because he's part of the family. And that is apparently more important than what this guy allegedly does. Sexual assault is usually perpetuated by someone close to the victim. I believe that's true, yeah. Sadly, by family is one of the most common ways this happens. That child will need therapy for life because of this. Damn shame. I hope she gets it, and I hope she sees a real therapist and not just a Christian one who just says whatever they want. What else we got? Wonder if any sociologists have examined any correlation between people who commit these crimes against children and what, if any, religion they practice. I don't know. I don't know if I've seen that sort of research or that kind of study. I would be curious if anyone knows of it. I will say, I mean, there's a reason every time one of these pastors or someone involved in a ministry gets accused of this stuff or arrested and convicted for this stuff, there's a reason you see those like hashtag not a drag queen, because everyone talks about trans people or cross dressers or people in drag who are doing this stuff. And it's like, no, I'd feel comfortable around a person wearing drag. I would not automatically feel comfortable sending my kid alone to Sunday school. So I don't know what the numbers are, but the percentages are not great. I would like to know why the state hasn't become involved in the situation. I think I answered that recently. The police have opened up the case now or reopened it. And so we'll see what happens. We'll see what the evidence the secular authorities go to. I did find it interesting that even though Jonathan and Suzy went to a Christian reporter who broke this story, they also went to the secular police, and they said other journalists. I don't know who the other ones are. I haven't seen any other stories about this in any other outlet, but it seems like they could not trust the Christians they were close to, so they decided to go to the secular authorities because they actually needed to get shit done. I find that very revealing. Oh, thank you for that donation. Think this might backfire? I was highly educated in Lutheran doctrine, but left because my pastor couldn't answer my questions on hypocrisy during confirmation. Early exposure, not meeting real life. I don't know what you're referring to, Dusty Dark Horse, about what might backfire. I don't know if we're talking about this story or the one before, but listen, if you're trying to, I wonder what's going to happen to Daystar Ministry. And if we're talking about the previous story about Texas pushing the Bible in school, if kids are questioning what they are learning and teachers can't answer that or can't give a good answer, I mean, how many people do you know who are atheists despite having gone to Catholic school where questioning was like a big deal? Or how many atheists do you know who are like, yeah, when I was a kid, I went to Sunday school, my parents made me, and I asked questions like, why does this picture of Eve show her with a belly button? And things like that. And they were always told to shut up. And it didn't take long for them to become an atheist. So yeah, if you want to, will pushing the Bible on kids backfire? Yeah, I'm not the first to say this, but the road to atheism is paved with Bibles.